Welcome back to UNCUT with Lucia. Today we are speaking with Anika Savoy. Anika is a paranormal historical romance author, and her latest book called The Ghost in Her is out now. So welcome, Anika, to UNCUT with me, Lucia.
Thank you, Lucia. I love talking to you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, me too. And Anika, I know that you are a lawyer and also majored in
Mm.
English literature in the university. So, have you always wanted to be a writer? I know that lawyers used to be writers, yes, but
Uh-huh.
not this kind of books that you write. So, let us.
Right. I've always wanted to be both. And I'm really not kidding. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a writer. I knew that for sure. And I was always writing short stories and keeping journals. But at about the same time, at about 8 or 9 years old, I thought I want to be a lawyer too. So I don't know where those desires come from, other than to say, I think I knew what my destiny was. I knew even then what my skills were. And yeah, you would be surprised how much writing is involved with being a lawyer. For 2 years, I wrote judicial opinions for a federal judge in the Social Security Administration. And every day I had to write like a 12-page opinion. So it's very different type of writing. It's very logical, very fact-based, but in so many ways that really helped shape my future writing because I believe it gave me more substance, probably more knowledge of basic grammar and vocabulary. So the two just melded perfectly. And when I practiced law, I would often be writing a book on the weekends just for fun.
Wow. Just for fun. Yes,
And
and Anika, it's impressive that you knew what you wanted to do at age 8 or 7 or 8 and
yes.
wanting to create new words. So I can
Yeah.
imagine. And what about your parents? Did they
About my
support you?
parents. I think I was the black sheep of the family in a very strange way. I was the last of five kids, and I was more the creative rebel. And I was the baby of the family. My parents, boy, how do I put this? Um, I grew up in a very traditional Catholic household where the father was the breadwinner. My father was a dentist, and my mother was a stay at home mother of five children. So both of my parents usually had a book that they were working on, that they were reading. So I was aware of that, but um, I can honestly say to you that it was more of a private venture on my part. I didn't get a ton of encouragement from my parents. Um, but I will tell you who did encourage me a lot were teachers in junior high and high school. I went to a public school in Massachusetts, and it was a wonderful mix of kids from all walks of life, and my teachers I don't know, they took a liking to me. They saw that I had these skills, and many of them, told me that I had what it took to be a great writer. And so I'm really so grateful to them. And maybe some of your listeners can relate that, I didn't have that perfect family upbringing where the parents were so proud of me. Um, but I got that satisfaction and encouragement through other sources.
Yes, and teachers,
Yeah.
they are like angels.
It,
They can see.
they are.
Yeah.
They are. You don't know as a teacher how much you can influence a child's life. Because when I look back on it, if I didn't have that handful of people in my school years urging me on, I may have not had the perseverance to deal with all the setbacks and the disappointments and keep going because they told me I had what it took. Yeah.
Mhm. And now you are a super author of
Oh,
many
yeah.
books.
Well, I'm really excited because The Ghost in Her, the paranormal
Mhm.
historical romance, it's book one in the Ungilded series. And that was recently nominated on the short list for awards from Chanticleer, I believe it is, book reviews.
Wow.
And then the nonfiction I just came out with, Escape from Mariupol, A Survivor's True Story, just won the Independent Press Award in the social and cultural category. So that brings me tremendous happiness because it's an affirmation. You know, as a writer, you don't get a lot of affirmation, you know, even on online reviews sometimes, you know, or Goodreads or whatever. So yeah, whenever I just get those little awards, it keeps me going, tells me I'm on the right track.
That's super. And congratulations. I didn't
Thank
know
you.
I got these awards. And,
Yeah.
you know, Anika, I love how there is a witch, a dragon, and of course, ghosts, making it the perfect escape from reality. I love it. So, can you quickly tell us what the book
Uh-huh.
is about? I know that it's
Sure.
normal, but please let us
Mhm.
know better.
Well, let's start with the main figure, the main character, the heroine, Maggie O'Connor,
Mhm.
who I adore. I relate to in a lot of ways. She is the quintessential underdog. You know, I compare her to a scrappy fighter in a fight club, you know, in the turn of the century. She's a real survivor. And she's an Irish immigrant. She's very beautiful, but she's totally impoverished, living in the Bowery in 1888, and wondering how she's going to rise above her social circumstances and have any kind of a safe and purposeful future. So much of the book is about her trying to escape poverty and trying to find enough work and money just to pay the bills and to eat. She literally lives in a hole under the ground beneath a tenement in the squalid Bowery district of turn of the century New York City. And one of the big plot things is that early on, her sister dies in childbirth, and Maggie must assume care of this little orphan boy, but the boy is abducted. So she must find out what happened to this baby. Is he at an orphanage? Where did he go to? So throughout the book, she's looking for her sister's baby, and she has the assistance of ghosts who come to her, and they're almost like angels. They try to help her in her journey to find the baby. And it's perfect because Maggie is a seer, and she comes from a long lineage of Irish women who were at the time considered witches because they had paranormal gifts, they were psychic. And she keeps this gift as a seer very private because she doesn't want to end up in an insane asylum, in a lunatic asylum, or burned at the stake as a witch, which happened as late as 1895 in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very dangerous to talk about ghosts and psychic things at the turn of the century. I suppose unless you were a real upper class woman where you were protected by your money, but for a poor woman to walk around saying she sees ghosts, you're just asking for trouble.
No
So
way.
she, no, she keeps it a secret. And unfortunately, she does end up at the lunatic asylum. And she has to figure out a way to escape the asylum. She falls in love with a wonderful man, a Jewish man in New York City, and he assists in helping her to escape the lunatic asylum on Blackwell's Island.
But there are a lot of action, as I can see.
Yeah.
And also,
Yes.
Anika, so go ahead.
No, I'm interested in what you have to say, Lucia.
Yes, because I was reading about this book and I'm curious about the title, Bowered Princess. What exactly
Yeah.
does this title represent? And how does Maggie
Uh,
go about earning it? I know you cannot give no
uh,
spoilers, please, but what does it
yes.
mean, Bowery Princess?
Princess. Actually, I love that you asked that question. Nobody has asked me that question about the Bowery Princess. At the end of the book, she assumes the title of the Bowery Princess, which is sort of an oxymoron because the Bowery is such a filthy, crime-ridden, dirty place at that time period in history. And it's like a fairy tale. She becomes the princess of the Bowery. she rises above in a rags to riches story. And she represents what every young woman, every destitute, impoverished woman in the Bowery longs for, to rise above and to have a parade in her honor where the carriage goes through the streets of the Bowery and people throw flowers and hail her as the Bowery princess. But it's kind of tongue in cheek because I include in the book several times reference to a Flash newspaper. It's called Flash. And I made that up. But it is representative of a lot of the tabloid newspapers that they had back then. You know, we think of tabloids as being like a modern day phenomenon, maybe dating back to the 60s or 70s of this century or last century, the 1900s. But in fact, the tabloids began way back in 1860. So really, when printing presses came along, these kind of salacious magazines and newspapers came out that everyday working class people would read. And so Flash newspaper gets hold of Maggie's story, and they, tongue in cheek, as sort of an insult, call her the Bowery princess, because now she's a wacky woman in their way of thinking. She ends up at the lunatic asylum, and so it's meant to be derogatory, but it turns and ends up working in her favor, because she really becomes like a Rocky Balboa. She becomes a woman of the people, you know. And I wrote all of that with a keen awareness of how social media and tabloids today can really ruin a person. You know, I mean, it's sad to say I'm with teenagers who don't have the psychological kind of development. You know, it can literally lead them to suicide. And I'm reading Spare now by Prince Harry.
Okay.
And it's just really interesting to me, this whole phenomena of the media, the paps, as they call them, the paparazzi, and how they can make or break you. And there's no telling from one day to the next if you're going to be the princess of the headlines or the villain. Exactly. And it's scary how many people just jump on the bandwagon based on a 2-paragraph article they read in a tabloid or they see on Reddit. Yes. And then they think they know the person, they tear them apart without any, you know, empathy to the fact that this is a human being with feelings. Yes. You know,
today this cancel culture is so dangerous. So I don't
really
know
is.
how it will be, if there will be a way to stop it.
I know. And I just find that there's such a contrast, Lucia, between my real life every day and what I see on social media and what I see in the news, because I feel like in my day-to-day life, people are very, for the most part, very kind and just normal, right? But when we go into that space of being anonymous, oh boy, I mean, it's like a dragon inside of people comes out, a ferocious, mean dragon. And we find ourselves saying things that we would never say to our next door neighbor. We would never say about a stranger, but you know, because it's a high profile celebrity or whatever, we just go to town and have a ball with it. It's a very ugly part of human nature, but it is what it is. And it was around back in the turn of the century too.
Yeah, since those times. And also, Anika, I wanted to get into the paranormal historical romance genre. Why paranormal?
Why? You know, I think it encapsulates so many of my interests. Ever since I was a little kid, I'm very into spiritual things, thinking about near death, what happens when we die. Is there heaven? Is there hell? Do ghosts exist? Are there angels, spirit guides? This is something I've always been intrigued by. And I think I'd mentioned to you in the past that I had a near-death experience when I was 17. And that really opened my mind to, wow, we are not just in this realm. There is another realm, you know, knocking at our door, and we need to try to find the signs. We need to try to figure out beyond this life, what is there, beyond this human form, this human body. So that explains why I'm so interested in the paranormal. As far as historical romance, well, I love history. I especially love American history, turn of the century, Gilded Age, Victorian history. And what about romance? I used to be much more into romance than I am now. And the fact that I write it, I think it just speaks to the fact that I can write in different genres. You know, I also write nonfiction. And my nonfiction is really gritty. You know, my last book was about a serial killer that I got to know who confessed his crimes to me. The book that just came out in December is about a Ukrainian refugee who was trapped in Mariupol during the worst of the invasion. So I just have a really diverse range of interests. I'm not like one of these women who only reads romance. I don't think I've read a Harlequin romance ever in my life. But I've certainly read a lot of books with romance in them. So, yeah. Who doesn't love romance?
Everybody.
Everybody, yeah. But something I try to do in the book, Lucia, is to continually emphasize that Gershom, her love interest, is not saving her. You know, she's not a damsel in distress, that she can do very well on her own. Thank you very much. But if he wants to help, that's great too. But what I try to do is set forth a healthy romantic relationship where they're just really into each other's minds. Oh, of course, they're really horny and attracted to each other, of course. But they love to talk about ideas and dreams, and that's what really ties this together. So I wanted to present a really healthy, inspirational romance, not one of these bodice ripper kind of shallow things, you know.
A healthy relationship.
Can you imagine?
And Anika, are you currently working on anything new you would like to share with our listeners?
Okay, yes. I'm writing Mayhem in Disguise, and that is book 2 in the Ungilded series. So book 1 was The Ghost in Her, and it tells Maggie's story. Mayhem in Disguise tells the story of the Irish Mohican nurse at the lunatic asylum who befriends Maggie at the end of the book. And her name is Bella McGuire. So in book 2, I'm telling Bella's story. Maggie will appear, you know, off and on throughout the book, but it's really Bella's story. It's an entirely new couple, an entirely new romance. And what Bella struggles with are a few things. One is the color of her skin. That as a Native American Indian, you know, she's got the darker hued skin, and she does everything to powder herself and act like a proper lady and do everything to try to deceive people, because she's ashamed almost of this Mohican blood, in that she knows it's a setback in the Gilded Age if you had darker skin, and arguably some people would say yes, even today. So it's a growth for her. As the book goes on, she understands that this is something to be proud of. This is something beautiful. It represents a spirituality of Mohican Native American Indians and a history that's so rich with beauty. And she decides to embrace her Mohican heritage. Thank God.
Good. Thank God. And yes. Is she as strong as Maggie?
She is, in a different way. Maggie, one important part about Maggie that Bella does not have is that Maggie was abused as a child. And Maggie came from a very impoverished, abusive household where her father was an alcoholic and he would beat the wife and the children. And even to this day, Maggie has a limp because one time he broke her leg. And so Bella does not have all of that baggage that Maggie has. Bella is also not a psychic. Bella is a very matter-of-fact, logic-based, scientifically minded woman because she's a nurse and she falls in love with a surgeon. So that's another part of Bella's growth, is that we start off the book where she doesn't believe in the hereafter. She doesn't really believe in God. She just wants to focus on the here and now and lead a purposeful life. But through the travails that she goes through, and all I'll tell you so I don't spoil it, is she meets an energy vampire and he holds her captive. So suddenly she starts to open her mind. Yes. But that's true of life in general. That's for some of us, we're not believers until we encounter evil. And then we're like, oh, this is a force.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious now about this new book. When are you going to publish it?
The publisher, we signed on for 3 books in the series. So she wants the book, probably they'll start edits in the late fall and it will come out in January of 2024. And, when I wrote to her about some ideas about the book, I said, is there any way we can put it out before Christmas? Because I wanted to do a big Christmas scene because I love movies and books with Christmas in them. And she said, no, we've already got our slots full. Why don't you do Valentine's Day as your big scene in the book? So that all works in with the energy vampire. So the book will be out before Valentine's Day 2024.
Very good.
Yes, I hope you like it.
I will. Definitely, I'm going to read your book. And Anika, where can we find you online?
Anika Savoy, author.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Anika Savoy. You can find me on Facebook as Anika Savoy. And my books are at all major book outlets. If you can't find them in person in the bookstore, go online. You can find them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any major outlet, or just go to your local bookstore and ask them to order the book. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I want to say thank you for coming to UNCUT with Lucia today. I interviewed her for the podcast, and it's such a pleasure to speak with you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Have a wonderful day.